Welcome to Dayton Warcry Club. I am Warren, and today I'm joined by my co-host Fred, as well as several special guests to talk about Adepticon. We got Michelangelo Sansom, the 4-0. Oh, we got Pete.
Hello, hello.
What's up?
Kyle, you are muted. And we got Robert here.
Oh, I made it.
We'll be covering our lists and experiences from multiple events we played in and share some of the things we learned. Hey, how's it going?
Good. All hyped up on Adepticon. I went out and got new paints and brushes today to start working on new hobbying for the first time in a while. So feeling good, had a great time, and pretty excited to talk about it.
Yeah, going there, seeing the sites was definitely motivating for the hobby. You get to see like the Golden Demon, the giant dioramas and stuff like that.
Yeah, and just other people's lists and other games, like the quality of the terrain and like the paint jobs on the tables on every game I walked past all looked really good. So it just made it look really appealing, you know?
Yeah, I took a handful of pictures. I didn't use a lot of them in this video though, but if you're listening on the podcast, remember check us out on the YouTube channel. It's the best place to experience it. We're actually up to like 450 some subscribers. We randomly get a new subscriber every day or two. And so thanks guys if you're a new subscriber, thanks for subscribing. We put these out maybe once a month or so, and they take a little bit of time to put together, but I do appreciate it. And it lets me know that, okay, yeah, people are the algorithm is working and people are finding us and subscribing. So as long as that keeps happening, we're going to kind of keep on putting this out here to kind of give you some in-depth analysis of lists from top tournaments.
Yeah, I told there was at least one person at Adepticon that I played that was like, I'll go subscribe to you guys right now. I'm like, yeah, you will. Just make it happen one person at a time.
Yeah, it would work better if we had swag and shirts and stuff like that. But
yeah, I had all my Nurgle swag, but that's not the same thing.
Yeah, the merchandising arm of Dayton Warcry Club is not as strong as it was for Dayton Magic Club.
This is very true.
But yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about hobby update, some of the picks that we had from our games, and then go right into Adepticon coverage. We'll talk about our lists and some of our games that we played, and then also cover some of the top lists. And we have some folks coming on as well to talk about their lists as well. And then we'll also we actually have a couple of upcoming events as well. So here's my hobby update. My personal hobby since the last time we recorded, I got a lot of iron jaws done. It didn't happen in just a month. They were being worked on slowly, about a week at a time. There's a local shop at the good old Game Haven. They do a hobby hangout every Wednesday. So I've been going there. Yeah, I've been making the time to go there every Wednesday, bring something simple to work on, right? And just a week at a time. All right, I'm painting all the bone on these guys. I'm painting all the boots and pants on these guys. And if I'm not doing anything else, I'm at least getting 2 or 3 hours of hobby time in a week. And it usually motivates me to do more. And then for more complicated stuff like those brew gets, that's stuff I got to do at home because there's just too many paints involved for that. So
yeah. They're fiddly. They look good. They're coming along. I'd prefer to see them bright yellow, but that's me.
No, I specifically chose not to do that.
But yeah, they look good. I'm interested to see how they play on the table.
I've got a couple games in with various configurations, not the actual tournament configuration I want to try, but just kind of getting a feel for how our boys work mathematically, brutes, how much can they afford to take out when they and that sort of thing. Playing them super aggressive and losing games because of it, but oh well. I do all my losing while I'm learning.
Yes, that will come up later in the episode. Spoiler alert. So
you got a couple of your pictures from a couple of your games. So on the left, this was you versus the Cities of Sigmar player. So you played against the guy that had that crazy ogre kit bash with the catapult on it.
Yep. Very cool. His army looked great. Warband looked great. Good games. And then on the right, that would be against JJ on his
Bone Reapers.
Yep, on his OBR with a Dreadblade Harrow ally. It was a good game, very tight game.
Yep.
You can see the Fly Lord, the Lord of Afflictions, just hanging out in the background there.
Here's a couple of nice picks from a couple of my games. Actually, these are both versus Eric from Dogs of Warcry. I got him as the ringer in round 1 of the narratives. Got my horns on the left there. They're all kind of like converging on the center for the mission that we played. Kind of go into a little more detail about that. You can see the Bull Centaur coming onto the table on turn 2 in that game. So yeah, I played horns for that. It was pretty good time.
Yeah, horns are one of the, like, I would think that if you are being like narratively consistent and having like a warband that's like as intended, I guess, you know what I mean? Like out of the box, like faction appropriate without like min-maxing every ally and everything. I think horns may be one of the stronger ones you can play and still keep that kind of cohesion. So yeah, I like the bases on the horns. They look really good. We talked about that a little bit at Adepticon. And again, like they just look good. They just look consistent across the board, and like they're here to get games won. I wish they were dwarves, but that was, that's Games Workshop's decision, I guess.
Oh, I like the derpy looking farmers actually, especially
yeah.
especially the one I kit.
To.
Yeah, the one I kit bashed with the big head.
Oh, big head? Yeah, I remember big head. It's good stuff.
So shout out to War Tally. War Tally saved the day because Best Coast pairings crapped out during the tournament, and so the TO had to scramble and get the whole tournament moved over onto War Tally. And so if you go to War Tally, most of the lists are there, all the results are there as well. Better place to have the results anyway.
Yeah, and shout out to the TO for just on the fly between rounds, just like moving the whole tournament over to an entirely new system by hand, like, and tracking all the results and everything and having to enter all that manually and changing. He had to change the tiebreaker, the primary, like the first tiebreaker on the fly, and like keep that up because of the way War Tally wouldn't. The idea was to have a tournament quest be worth a point, so that would kind of give some uneven results for the undefeateds, because we're only playing 4 rounds, there were going to be at least 2 undefeateds. But it had to switch to kill points and handle all that really, really well. It could have been a complete disaster. 44 players, BCP goes down. There's only 1 judge for the whole thing, but I mean, handled it amazingly well, and it was a great event.
So before we get to some of the top lists, let's cover your list for the competitive day. So you've run this list before. So you run the Varangard, Demon Forge Blade, the Lord of Afflictions, aka the Fly Lord at 320. Then your leader is Nurgle Demons, Plague Ridden, the 90-pointer leader, and then 6 Plague Bearers, 995 points, 9 models.
So I like the list. I still like the list. I think it's a good kind of, if you don't know the tournament pack, I think it's a kind of a good, well-rounded list. The 2 hammer models, your Lord of Afflictions and your Varangard, are both very effective at doing what they need to do, and you have some of the very, very best chaff in the game to kind of fill out your model count. It was not necessarily the right list for this tournament, because we got the mission pack, before the tournament, not way before, but I was already back and forth between this and what I would consider to be like the more optimized list, which is you take out the Lord of Afflictions and you replace him with a Fulmoroid Crusher and another Plague Bearer.
Yeah.
That gets your model count higher and gives you the Lord of Afflictions is really good at a couple of different things. Great at killing soft targets and great at just like tanking. It can tank a tremendous amount of chaff models or even mid-range models, even if they're critting, because it has so many wounds, right? It's not like it doesn't get burst down quite as bad by big crits, because its points aren't in toughness, they're in wounds. Plus the net ability is really, really good. Having a flying model is good. There's a lot to like about this list, but the mission pack definitely favored the extra model, and the Fulmoroid Crusher is a little more dialed in as out dueling other hammers than the Lord of Afflictions is. It was a real toss up for me. I love the Lord of Afflictions. I think it's a great looking model. It's really thematic to the warband, and I think that it's competitive. But then once we got the mission pack, I could kind of tell right away that like the better move was probably to pivot to the Foamward Crusher, but I just kind of didn't. I like this list, but that list would have been, I think, better. It would have solved some of the problems I ran into. But the basic thought behind this list is if you're playing an event that doesn't allow monsters, you can still kind of build a list along those same guidelines, like have the biggest, baddest model on the board and fill in with like the most efficient chaff. So you can like still get that number count up there to be competitive with the swarm lists, but have like an absolute like wrecking, like a true battle game warping piece on the board to kind of revolve the thing around. But that works well in a couple of different types of missions, and it doesn't work quite as well as going a little wider in other types of missions. I think the list is good. You keep the Varangard moving with Relentless Killers. Your really good chaff kind of holds all your points, and your Fly Lord can either go sting your opponent's best models and play a really good blocking game with a big base, a net, and a lot of wounds, or it can go bounty hunting on mid-range units or even other elites. So nothing really to it. It is just a min-max list, right? Like really good hammers and really efficient chaff.
So you talked about the missions. Let's kind of go over your tournament day, and I have the missions here. So round one, they played Supremacy from the Rumble pack, and
Yes.
this was your game versus the Cities of Sigmar player, and I don't have the name handy.
I do. Give me a second. That was Patrick. Patrick playing Pestilence.
Patrick with a Y.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So this he had, I don't know if he said that he hadn't played much Warcry before or he hadn't played much competitive events before, but either way, this was a little bit of a new experience for him one way or the other. Either, hadn't got a lot of games under his belt or hadn't at a tournament level, but really nice guy. We had a great game, really fun game. But Supremacy is one of those missions that when you've played it a couple of times, you kind of realize how important it is not to fall behind heavily early.
Yep.
And he looked at the board, looked at my warband, made his deployments, and I got out to a 6-0 lead in the first round. And then
because he was playing a stereotypical Cities of Sigmar gunline list with more
he
shooters.
kind of wanted to hang back and shoot and try to kind of attrition me down, which again, it's not necessarily that that's a bad strategy in general, especially against a list like Nurgle, but in Supremacy, it kind of forces you to be a little more aggressive in actually claiming the territory, because again, it's once you get up 6-0, then I can just play really defensively the rest of the battle, and that's what I did. I ran the Varangard. Once I got up to the lead, I ran the Varangard up to his Ogre. I forget the name of the unit, but the one with sniper crows on the Ogre, the Warhawk. And I pinned it down with my Varangard in the far corner. And the thing about the Warhawk is it's like got a 24-inch range, but like relatively weak melee attacks for like a big centerpiece model. I think it does like 3-4.
Yeah, so it's not gonna spike you down.
So I just kind of let him try to kill my Varangard over there in the corner while keeping some of his big gunline pieces tied up. And then just let my plague bearers kind of like hold as much territory as I could and retreat if it looked like they were going to lose, because I had a big lead, and I ended up winning. The other thing of note in that game is in the final round, my Varangard was starting to take some damage, and I double reacted to the Slaves to Darkness reaction that restores 3 health, and he entered the game at exactly 1 wound. So he hung in there the whole fight and just tied up like a whole deployment group in that corner. And that worked out really well. That was a major victory for me.
So then next was Bloodshed. And so Krister from Warcry gets credit for creating this mission. So this is a twist. Well, at first glance, it looks like a twist on Reaper, where there's kill points, but a secondary based around being within 5 inches of the center.
Yes. So I played against JJ in this round on the OBR. We showed pictures of that. JJ is a pretty known player, good player. I don't think I ever played him unless he was at Gen Con. But I don't think so. I don't think I'd ever played him before.
He was not.
But I knew of him by reputation, and he played very, very tight. I could tell right away. One thing I got right about this match, looking at it, because I went into the tournament really rusty. I didn't get nearly as many reps in as I would have liked to. Life just kind of came up. I got 2 young kids at home and et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of had to go off of like my best known parallels to go into some of these matches. And the one thing I got right about it, looking across the table and seeing the OCR Bone Reapers with the Dreadblade Harrow, was that the Dreadblade Harrow reanimating was going to be a potential issue. Keeping that center point, that 5-inch center point, well stocked with tough to kill Chaff models. The thing I got wrong about it was it looks a lot more like Reaper than it plays.
Yes. And Salty was talking about this. I had a lot of conversations with Salty over the course of the weekend, and yeah, it is not a substitute for Reaper. It is a swarm mission, because a swarm warband, and he had done all the stats right. If you check his video out, at least for these first 2 missions, he was kind of doing the breakdown in terms of like, did the warband with the biggest model win, or did the warband with more models win, to try to figure out what the keys to victory were, at least for these early rounds. And for both of these, it was overwhelmingly where the swarm warband was winning, because if you win all 4 of the rounds in the center, that gives you 4 VPs, and you only need to win 1 round of the kill points to. You only need to win 1 round of the kill points to tie the game at best and actually pull ahead. If you assume that only 3 rounds someone's going to kill something, because oftentimes for round 1 it's hard to get a kill.
Yeah, so I jumped out to an early lead. Varangard is good in Reaper type missions because it can move 10 and it puts out a lot of damage. So sometimes people kind of hang a Chaff model out there, in range, and you can relentless killers it down and that kind of thing. But so a thing about my list, Plague Bearers are good for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons, and of course the big draw, is that they're 50 points, right? So you can get a lot of activations out of your list, even if you spend a lot of points elsewhere because you have such cheap Chaff. But the way the list is built, you really expect to get some production out of your Plague Bearers, because that 3-3-1-4 profile is surprisingly damaging in high numbers, right? When you get a lot of attack things, you have a lot of models, because that extra point of crit damage is pretty significant. It adds up when you roll a lot of dice. And against OCR Bone Reapers with its super tough Chaff, I got no production out of my Plague Bearers. So this is the point where I'm like, man, I wish I had a Fulmaraid Crusher to come in here, to wade in here and just crack skulls of these Chaff units. So I couldn't get the Chaff down as quickly as I wanted, which made fighting for the center a little difficult. JJ played really well with his positioning, trying to block, lanes. And it did come down. This is a draw. And in the final round, he edged ahead in kill points and managed to resurrect a unit into that 5-inch range. Too late for me to do anything about it. That gave him the kill point victory and the extra point for having more models in the center. So like a 3-point bump in 1 round to get the draw. And there was I lacked the effective mobility to chase down a 10-inch flyer like the Dreadblade Harrow. And I wasn't winning the attrition war win the activation war. So he got some late activations in the round that I couldn't do much about, and that Reza came with a huge. And that's how that one went down. I immediately, like in round 2, I was like, oh, this is not Reaper at all. But the first round, I'm like, okay, we're going to play it like Reaper, and then found out that, like, no, it was not Reaper. Really cool mission, though. I really liked it. I would absolutely love to play it again. Consider it for your tournament packs. It's super cool. But now I have a little better idea of how to play it, I think. But yeah, it was a really tight game and a lot of fun. JJ's a great player and a good opponent. So.
Yeah. Then next up, round 3 was most dangerous game.
Another interesting one that without the reps under my belt that, again, I have no one to blame but myself on this. I'm going to say it a lot that I was missing these reps. But the important thing is if you get the tournament pack in advance, like play the tournament pack. I was unable to. I really wish that I had found the time because it would have helped a lot. Because I learned these things. Some of these things are not exactly deep mysteries.
Well, so this was a mystery pack. This was a mystery pack, and then the pack got inadvertently leaked online. The TO had uploaded it to Adepticon, and it was publicly available unbeknownst to him. So word got out what the pack was, and then so the community kind of did what they could to kind of get the pack out to everybody so that we're all be on the same playing field. So you had a very short time to kind of prep.
That's true. But even getting more games in general before the event probably would have come across some of these missions, even not knowing the mission pack. It just, that's on me for not getting the reps in. But this game was my loss of the event. I lost to Mike, who was playing his Cool Boys Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles list. So this is another one. I looked at it on paper, right? And I have a big flying monster and a Varangard, which are generally good in Reaper type missions. And you can look at this and be like, okay, this is basically a Reaper type mission. And you can play it that way. And I played it really aggressive. Like, you get 2 points for killing a leader. And I saw an opportunity to get up there on the leader and try to kill it and try to get ahead on points. And what I realized almost immediately after that, and Mike and I talked about it at length, Mike, who went on to 4-0 this event, and I think he ended up second place on tiebreakers, was because the fundamental difference, and it's really obvious when you read the mission, but like to break it down, the fundamental difference between this and Reaper is you don't have to kill the most points. You can pick and choose, and you get 1 point for any model. It does not matter. You can pick your enemy's weak models and kill them. And so instead of, because in Reaper, I find a lot of times in the early rounds, my successes have come with, especially with this Nurgle list or similar Nurgle lists, has come from your opponent either hangs a model out there, or the way deployment groups work, you can close with your fast moving units and you get opportunistic and pounce on those so that you can get those points early. And then if you get a lead, you can do that thing where you kind of group up and hide your chaff and let your Lord of Afflictions and your Varangard do what they do best, which is kind of hunt targets across the board. But for that to work, you have to have that early lead, right? Yeah. So I see the leader is up in the corner. My Lord of Afflictions can reach it and attack it. And then if I win initiative, I can double attack it with at least an onslaught and try to kill it. The other thing going into this is, I know Mike and I know he's a good player, but in general, a weaker player tends to run from the Fly Lord in that kind of situation. And Mike looked at the board and correctly assessed that if the Fly Lord were to die, 1, he gets 3 points for it because it's worth the most points. And 2, I lose my mobility to play kind of hunter-killer with his small units that can climb, because the Vanguard can't climb after them. So he piled on, and I won initiative, and he basically gave me the shot to kill the leader, which I failed to do on 10 dice. It's fine. Everything's fine. But then he brought in a bunch of units and swarmed it down and killed it before I could get away with it. And I never really came back from it. The correct play for sure is, because this isn't Reaper, you don't have to, you can pick off Chaff in this mission and it works just as well. Sometimes in Reaper, if your opponent is hiding their low cost models and running out their tougher to kill stuff, your Lord of Afflictions has a little bit harder time bringing down opposing like Titans. But in this mission, the correct way to play it for sure was to go defensive from the beginning, hide the Chaff, force him to come after my 42 wound model or my 6 toughness model, and hunt down his Chaff egg snatchers, whatever those little cruel boy monster hunters guys are called. Clutchagrots. And just mark up his Clutchagrots and hunt. They can't escape the Lord of Afflictions. They're not fast enough. Climbing doesn't help. And I think I had a structural advantage from the list building phase here that I squandered immediately being too aggressive, because I just misassigned my role in the mission, played it too much like Reaper, played it too aggressive, and I lost the game in round 2 when the Lord of Afflictions died.
Yeah. So
just hung it out there and got it wrecked.
So I'll say this, because I've played this before, and I look at this mission in terms of like how many points do you expect to score versus how many points do you think your opponent is going to score. So, right, I would expect your opponent to be able to score 4 points against you. Either take out 4 Chaff models, because you can usually pick something and kill it pretty easily. You can kind of call your shots. You can maybe keep 1 away. You have a weak leader, and so your leader being squishier than most leaders is kind of a liability there. So I'd say your opponent is probably going to score 4 points, which means that you have to, if you have to kill 4 Clutchagrots to score in this case to score 4 points for a tie, or if you want to score 5, you have to make a play for his leader for 2, and again, it also hinges upon you keeping your Fly Lord alive, because your Fly Lord on the board is worth 3.
Right. So here's something that I could have done, and I actually considered it. I talked through my lines out loud. Is the Fly Lord the leader, and then one of his big heavy hitters was there. It was Casey Jones. So I don't remember exactly what Casey Jones was.
It was a Beast Snob. The leader, yeah, that was the leader. That's a Beast Snob in the same deployment group as a Brugit.
So what I could have done, because my Vanguard, who would be maybe better suited for this role, was kind of coming around the corner a little bit, and I was worried about his leader climbing at that point. And I'm like, my opportunity here is I could swoop in and kill the leader, but the less aggressive play, instead of using that double for Onslaught, would have been use that double for Venomous Sting to net the leader, then disengage and move and fly up on top of the surrounding terrain where his models that he brought in to try to kill the Fly Lord couldn't get to it. And then now the leader is still hung out there and netted, and he has to make a decision whether he wants to take those models and move them up and try and intercept the Vanguard, or let the Vanguard move in and relentless killers on the leader and try to score those points that way. Ultimately, I decided not to make that play, but I think it would have been a significantly better play to do it that way. Just a little less aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of play and counterplay at this point. At this point anyway, though. So.
And obviously, Mike went on to 4-0 the event, and he's a very, very good player. And I don't know that you can make that kind of mistake against a very good player and expect to walk away. And in this case, I certainly did not.
Right. Yeah, a good player actually, in not handicapping himself with a meme list. It was a meme list, but it was actually very structurally sound as well. And we'll chat with him about that a little bit later as well. So, and then finally, so round 4, So you've taken a draw, you've taken a loss up to this point. Now you're on ley lines, and this was versus, I think it was versus Bone Splitters, right? One of the guys from Salt Lake City.
Yeah, Brad Anderson was my opponent, and
I remember I remember you telling me that you were not aware that you could take an objective yet still have it be non-awakened, and then when it becomes awakened, it's already flipped to them.
Yeah, and again, if I had gotten the reps in, I would know nobody's fault but my own on that one. So it ended up being a really tight game, a lot of fighting over the center, as there often is. To be honest, I took less notes in this round. I was pretty worn out after my game with Mike that went really, really tight. But it ended up drawing. Although on Salty's video, he had a Nurgle list with a Fly Lord and a Varangard going 2, 1, and 1. So I don't know if it got it.
Nope, there was someone else playing your
exact same list.
There was someone else playing your exact same list. He played that list last year as well, and I did not get a chance to actually find him and meet him.
I knew there was another Fly Lord there, at least one. There were actually 2 other Fly Lords there. Someone was playing Nurgle Mortals as well. So this ended up being a really tight draw. I'm trying to remember what came up. Oh, there was like a couple opportunities for me to kill a model that was a relatively low health, that was scrumming around objectives that I missed. It was just a tight game. My opponent played well. His units were relatively tough to kill. I whiffed on a couple of die rolls, and it ended up being a draw. So I ended up with a very strange record of 1, 1, and 2. And
the identical list was played by James Kresh, and he went 2, 1, and 1.
So if you were to say to me, you can run back this exact tournament, even with random opponents, just you run back this exact same mission pack, I would run a different list, a fundamentally different, same factions, fundamentally different list, and I think it would be much better suited. And it is what it is. I had a great time. All my opponents were great, had some great games, but definitely rusty, and it definitely showed.
So you talked about that list. We got it right here. And so we had a few conversations both during Adepticon. This is, again, I had several talks with Salty about his various Nurgle lists that he's played in events, and stuff that we got to try here. A fundamentally different way of building lists. So Salty absolutely swears by the 130 point Potspringer leader. He has a 4-4-2-5 profile, fairly reasonable. He also swears by having at least 1 Nurglings, again, a reasonable profile, movement 5, and then you build around that. You don't necessarily need to have 2 super heavies at 255 points or so. You can sort of pick and choose. You can play Varangard plus Dark Oath War Queen, or you can play a Doombull, no, maybe not a Doombull, a Bloodkine and a Slakehorn, or you just take your pick of 2 solid models in about that range, and fill it out with plague bearers, and you're good to go. And so that's something that we kind of need to explore here. It's kind of like, instead of having the 2 major threat model, you almost have 4 threats, 1 big one and like 3 medium-sized ones. So in that vein, here's something else to try based on models you have or that you want to play.
So obviously the Varangard is spectacular. It might be the best model in the game, I think. I think it's reasonable to say, like, on its own merits. Like, plague bearers are obviously insane, but like, you don't take 1 plague bearer and expect they're good because of their numbers. But like, and then I'm trying the Poxbringer. You could even go up to 11 models by splitting those Nurglings, that Nurgling, into 2 plague bearers, and go into 980 points.
You could go very wide. Yeah, you could go 11 models. You could even go 12 models, but I think that's a little skewed.
Yeah, 12 models you could take the Proxbringer down to a plague ridden and add another plague bearer would work. So, and obviously you have a couple more points to spend if you want. But so here's my thoughts on the list. The Varangard is toughness 6 and a bunch of wounds. The Lord of Plagues has 32 wounds, which is a lot. The Poxbringer is, like, in this mission pack, when you're fighting, scrumming over the center in a couple of missions. Like this guy, you're not going to send him hunting other good, fighters, but he's pretty effective at killing those Chaff models and reducing that model count there.
Yeah.
Nurglings
at 20 wounds for 130 points, he's not a liability. 90 points for a 15 wound leader is a little bit more of a liability.
Yeah. The Nurglings, you mentioned that they're fast, and they are, but they also have 25 wounds. So this list, much like Nurgle thematically should, this list has a lot of wounds in it. And they're kind of, instead of dumping them all into one place, it's spreading them out. But you still have a lot of wounds to deal with. And Plague Bearers are no joke either on their survivability so this is just a tanky list, top to bottom, can hold territory really well. And your Varangard is your hunter killer. Your Lord of Plagues is slow, but a very effective melee fighter that I think is probably pretty decent, that you can use to tangle with other Chaff, mid-range fighters, kind of whatever you need them to do. Just hold territory with 32 wounds and the Nurgle regeneration ability, whatever. And you still have your 6 Plague Bearers. This list, I think, would have performed a lot better. Again, opponent agnostic. Like, it would have performed better against my opponent's lists, but it would perform better against the mission pack, even given, like, re-randomized opponents, I think. And knowing the mission pack in advance, there was an opportunity to see that and look at it and think about it a little more and come up with this list. But I was a little stubborn wanting to play the Lord of Afflictions, but sometimes you have to be flexible when you get new information. And I think this would be a really interesting list to explore going forward.
And also you get bonus points because you're still staying thematically in Nurgle with Lord of Plagues, and you get to paint up a gut rot spume.
Yes, which I already have for my Nurgle mortals that are obviously horrible, but plays well here. There's probably a lot of other units you could consider for this slot, but I think that slot, and right here it's like between 170 and 185 points, is relatively model agnostic. As long as you have a good model in there, it's you can interchange it with a couple other pieces. I like the Lord of Plagues for its tankiness, but I'm sure you could find a lot of other. Chaos has a million good choices to slot in there. I know Dark Oath War Queen is something that people have been talking about. It would give you something to do with your dice because Nurgle don't have good dice abilities. That's something to consider, but not, of course, nearly as tanky as the Lord of Plagues. But yeah, that slot may change as I continue to work on the list, as I do a deeper dive into what models are available and kind of what the needs are for that slot. But I like the rest of it, and I think that this is a pretty good starting point for kind of a phase 2 Nurgle Demons list.
All right. So here we'll kind of cover my day. So I didn't come to the narrative day to make friends. I brought a competitive list to the narrative day tournament. And just because, I hadn't actually, I played one game with these for practice. These had just come back from where I had them commissioned. I did a little extra work on them, but shout out to paintedfigs.com where I got these commissioned.
Yeah, they look really good.
Yep. Yeah, I put everything together myself, including sourcing the Bull Centaur there. So yeah, I played the quote unquote stock Horns of Hashut list with the Fulmoroid Crusher, the Bull Centaur on the Fulmoroid Crusher base, about the same size. Ruinary Alpha with Flail, 2 Flamethrowers, a Demolisher with Shield to fill out the points, and 4 Shatterers for 1,000 points even, 9 models. And I have notes for a couple of the missions here. So round 1, I got the Ringer. I got to play Eric from Dogs of Warcry, and then the Dogs of Warcry put on this narrative event here. It was the mission on the left, Forced March. It is an escape mission where the first 3 rounds of the game, initiative winner? Yeah, initiative winner closes an edge of the battlefield. So after 3 rounds, you have 1 edge left, and then your goal here is to kind of position towards the middle, hope to win initiative to kind of close off the edges that you want. And then round 3 and 4 is either blocking or getting your big models off of the table. I like escape missions, to be honest. This mission, it's really initiative dependent, and yes, you are sort of forced to like really bank wild dice in an attempt to like steal initiative or guarantee initiative. If I hadn't won initiative on turn 3, I would have just straight up lost the game because the choice of table edges at that point would have made the game unwinnable for me. So
that's a little swingy, but I do kind of like the difference in approach that, like, because I don't know, it's a really interesting mission. I think the initiative aspect of it is a little swingy.
And for narrative, they do pick interesting, different missions, more different than the ones that we see for competitive, right? We have an escape mission. The second mission I didn't have down, but it was you had to get guys on elevated pieces of terrain. It wasn't higher ground, but it was similar to that, where if you had a guy, once you moved a guy onto the top of a piece of terrain, you controlled that piece of terrain. It was consecrated, and then you could knock people off. So that would come into play, or you would take over if you actually killed somebody while they were sitting on top. So, and there's the twists matter here too. Here for this escape mission, you have to disengage on a 3+. That comes into play sometimes. The fall checks on the second mission that we played, where I think you fall on a 1 through 3 as opposed to a 1, so that was a lot more relevant.
Okay.
I played a sec here. Round 2, I played Devin Morgan. He had the Grincrax Loon Court plus a troll. So he was fairly new to Warcry, so we kind of played a fun teaching game there. But yeah, he's a good guy. He was friends with Chris Hyde. And then round three we misread this. So round 3 there was a bunch of treasures in the center, or actually there's three guys from each of your teams are carrying treasure, and then we just said, okay, that's it. But apparently for everyone else, there's supposed to be treasures on the ground in the middle of the game, and so there's a mad dash for more treasures and stuff like that. And for this one, and I was paired versus another competitive player in this one, actually, Austin Lewis, and we'll cover his list. So he's a very competitive player, very good player as well. He brought his competitive list to the narrative as well, and so we battled it out to a draw. Again, I had to make some kind of aggressive moves up front, real back and forth. My Fulmroid was juiced up, and I had to make a play early on to try to run it into his deployment group right up front and try to take out his Necromancer, because I wanted to take out his reses, or at least lessen his ability to get reses off. So that was successful, but he held on. He pulled some tricks out. What was the Necromancer ability to siphon life from a guy? He did that to kind of keep his guy alive for a turn. And yeah, there's some good plays on both sides, but so we sweated it out to a draw. But shout out to Austin. Yeah, real solid player coming from Salt Lake City.
Very cool. That's a hike, man. I drove like 4 hours, 5 hours to get there. Okay, what I would like to say about this list is I did not necessarily have this list in front of me, but I knew that it was after the last round that KO had won the tournament. And so what I wanted to do, and I like to do this when I if there's a list that did well, the first thing I like to do, especially like I knew it was an 11 model KO list. Like, okay, what would I have played? Like, can I reverse engineer this? And I like to compare it to what was played and kind of see where our thoughts are similar and thoughts are different. So I sketched out a list, an 11 model KO list. They ended up being pretty close to this. And I like this one significantly better, even though mine was, I had a custodian instead of a company captain, basically is kind of where it was at. And the Sky Warden, to take the Sky Warden out and a company captain out and add a custodian and another Arknaut. So
Hold on.
I was like,
what's a custodian?
Custodian is one of the flying leaders.
Okay.
Hey, Kyle's here.
Bigger or smaller than the Skypike guy?
It's a melee first leader. It's like 4/4/2/5 and then has a shooting attack. It's like fine, but so I was like, okay, so let's take that as a concept and compare it to this. And what I saw looking at this that made more sense to me, that I really liked, is your because when I play KO, I always like to have a flyer, and it's usually a leader. But the problem with that is if you're using that to generate fight for profit, a very good percentage of the time your flyer isn't with your ground pounding gun line guys. So you did a really good move here and played the second company captain to have the sources of fight for profit and bumped the flying guy down. I don't think the Skyward and the Skypike is a great model at 185 points, but it's a more efficient use of it because you're not relying on that flying model to come up with fight for profits also.
Yeah, he doesn't break the bank. And in case you didn't know, this was covered in Dan's interview with him. In all these missions, you wanted to stack the daggers. It was very clear you wanted to stack your dagger group. And so it was an admiral and 2 eater cannons in the dagger group.
Yes. And when I saw this list, I felt really vindicated because I've been saying for a long time, a lot of the KO lists we've been seeing have had things like engine masters in the ground walking engine masters or the melee focused pieces in them. And I saw this list and I was like, this is a good KO list. Like it is focused on what it wants to do. It's a gun line list. You're not going to get muddled up by getting torn between wanting to get your good melee fighters into combat so they're doing something, but then clogging up your shooting lanes. Like it's a shooting first list that's built to shoot really, really well and focus on that. And there it is. It won the tournament, and I think it's a great list.
So next up, we got Michelangelo Sansom at 4-0. And he brought a meme list, but not exactly a meme list. It's actually pretty well constructed. He had a Beast Knob, Brugit to go with the Beast Knob, 2 monkeys from the Crew Boys Monster Killers, 2 neck slicers, 1 of each, 1 with the bone hacka, 1 with a harpoon, and then 4 Clutchergrots for a total of 995 points and 10 models. And you can see his conversions there. So I guess kind of to walk us through the conversions first, I guess, before we kind of get into the list.
Yeah, for sure. So sometimes the warband informs the conversion, sometimes the conversions inform the warband. And this one was actually kind of a beautiful meeting of both. So one day I think I was talking to Rob and decided that Ninja Turtles would really fit the theme of the warband. So started out knowing that I was doing four Eggrots for sure. And then looked at the Beast Knob and I was like, man, he's kind of already got like a backpack on. Looks like I could probably make him into Casey Jones pretty easily. So turned his harpoon into a hockey stick, added a couple of other like hockey sticks and clubs and stuff like that to the backpack, and then carved the golf club. got the the shredder model there, which is the bone hack in the list. That is the Scions of the Flame Leader. He's already kind of got the perfect mask, and then I green stuffed the helmet, stole some claws from some 40k models, and then Splinter came out of Scabix Plague Pack, did a little conversion, gave him a staff and a nice pointing hand. Then Bebop and Rocksteady were the monkeys. Oh yes, Splinter was the Brugit, obviously telling the turtles what to do. The monkeys, one of them was like an Oric from 40k, and then the other one was Dagok from Underworlds, the new Cruel Boys one. He basically, I looked at it, I was like, he kind of looks like he's already got turtle shells on his shoulders, so just kind of sourced some bits and all that kind of stuff and made that work, gave him some classes. And then in the back right corner, you can see there, that's Krang. That was the only model I didn't kit bash at all. I literally didn't need to. It's one of the Blight Kings with a Nurgling coming straight out of the belly. And I was just like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I need it to be. So just kind of customized. I guess maybe I just painted it. I think the like made it look like instead of like an intestine that he's shooting out of his hand, I turned it into like a rusty pipe. And yeah, it was a really fun warband to paint up though. And then put him on a fake pizza that I found online and painted the bases like pepperonis and put him in a pizza box for my presentation, which was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. So let's getting into the list a little bit though. So Fred already kind of talked about his match with you. You actually being the first person to take a match off of him in a tournament.
Oof.
since
Do
going
it.
back a couple of years since we've been playing. But
I earned it. It was a really good game. It was a fun one and a lot of thinking, and got a little bit lucky on dice in a few spots. But yeah, it was a really good game. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, so Beast Knob is strong enough. It's already like a good ally by himself. When paired with the Brugit, then it just becomes really scary to pretty much anything. So he can trade up. He could reasonably fight like even something big like a Fomeroid if you had to, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of like that approach is kind of what the whole list is doing, right? Whenever you want to attack, like if you go and just charge him with a Beast Knob and try to go blow for blow, you're gonna lose. The 25 wounds and 4 toughness just doesn't stand up like 35 wounds and 6 toughness on a FOMO, for example. So the egg gruts, what you're kind of doing is trying to play out the waiting game, try to get later activations whenever you can. And the synergy with the egg gruts is nice because if they wait, they can still react, or they can get their little move 4, put them in position, get them on objectives, all that kind of stuff, which works really nicely with trying to make the Beast Knob go late, and then obviously trying to win initiative and go early later.
Yeah, so boosting the model count is big, and then you mentioned the reaction. I think you also were going to be covering this in your own video, and I know we chatted about it as well. But so the cruel trap doesn't look like much on the surface, but even like the floor being 2 damage, it's perfectly fine, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just, and like I learned a little bit out of it actually playing in narrative using some of their other abilities, and I realized that it synergized really well with some of the narrative stuff, and then it kind of made me think about them differently. And it's almost like this drain effect, right? Like where it's not a ton of damage, but it's just like this slow kind of whittling away of some of the wounds and stuff like that your opponents have. And nothing in here, the Beast Knob obviously whacks pretty hard, but he really needs to get kills, because again, if you don't win initiative next round and you're engaged with some massive other smasher, you're usually going to die and lose that fight. So helping kind of whittle down and get the things that you want to kill into a more reasonable kind of kill zone with either 1 attack or 2 attacks with some dice and that kind of stuff, that 2 damage just kind of pinging away and chipping away really helps. And then obviously the 4 damage spikes are really nice, and you never really rely on the net unless you actually have to, right? But you're just looking at it as, look, I'm guaranteeing myself 2 damage here, and makes it easier for the howlers, for the harpoon and the hackers to get their kills for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like the theory of, why do you include range guys in warbands nowadays? A lot of, if it's, even if it's not going to like one-shot something, just the chip damage, there's value to the chip damage.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so helpful. And again, especially with this one where like you're melting, right? Like most of the time these guys are losing one-on-one fights just because of the 3 toughness on the monkeys and the 2 neck slicers, and then only 4, on the clutcha and the eggs. I guess Brugit's got 3 as well. So it's another one that, he's not usually fighting anyway, but it really helps you, finish the fights kind of as soon as they start, which really helps, because otherwise, you end up losing a model, and then as soon as you lose kind of some of your damage output in this, everything starts to fall apart. So it's a little House of Cardsy, but it synergizes internally so well that you never really feel the pressure, as long as you know kind of the approach to use with them.
So besides the Brugit obviously being one of your primary outlets for doubles, did the abilities on the Bone Hacker or the Harpoon come up?
Oh, big time. Yeah, I Rip It Out, I think, is one of the most satisfying abilities to play in the game. It really, it's really nice when you can bless it and you can go from the range attack of strength 4 to strength 5, just because it helps you hit on 3 so much more, which lets you push out that Rip It Out damage. But it's cool because it's not just like this random ability that sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. You really get to choose when you want to use it. And so, if you're hitting on 5s and 6s, typically you probably just don't use it. And honestly, because the range is 3 on that guy, sometimes you can just get into melee, be hitting at the same damage profile, because it's the 8-inch attack or the melee attack are literally the exact same. But, if you're close to something, you can kind of just, use Onslaught instead and just crank up to that extra dice instead of using the double. So, but yeah, getting Rip It Out really helps. I know some people have good luck with it. The Bone Hacker one, when you roll whatever the value of the triple is and try to make the longest straight that you can out of it is. I've rolled a lot of 6 dice versions of that, and I think my max damage is still only 3 dice in a row, so that would be 9 total damage, which is a bummer. But yeah, I mean, even 3-6 damage, it's on a triple maybe isn't necessarily, always feeling like it's valuable. You don't really have any other homes for triples in this warband though, unless you really want to do Inspiring Presence, unless you want to heal. There's not really anything else because they didn't bring the Bala Boy who turns off the reactions. So there's not really other uses for triples. So it's really the only place you're dumping those triples. And if you roll a natural triple, you're almost always going up to a quad with this warband. So, if you get a high value double that you're not planning on using, or 2 high value doubles, you can either use it for Rip It Out or you can use it for Saw 'em Up. And Saw 'em Up with the Haka just does the exact same thing that the Eggrots are doing. It helps you get more damage in, even if you only, if you roll 6 dice and you only get 6 extra damage out of it, then if you're double attacking as well, usually you can kill most mid-range fighters with the 3-5 2-4 damage profile that the Haka has. So it just all, again, it all synergizes, and it's all about just like, let's get as much damage through as we can right when it's time to do it, so that we win the fights as soon as we get there instead of trying to outlast anything, because this warband cannot outlast anybody.
Yeah, it could be kind of squishy, but yeah, 6 damage off of a triple, I'd be perfectly happy with that. And then anything above that, it's just gravy, right? Like if you get 9, I'd be ecstatic.
Man, you spike at 18. I think Rob rolled a straight one time when he did it, and yeah, I mean that's absolutely incredible. You're in heaven if you get that much, but yeah, again, just that 6 damage. It's the equivalent of a hit and a crit on the regular attacks. So you do. If you roll, a hit and a crit the rest of your attacks on your, strength 5, you're putting 18 wounds out there on just one activation, which again kills a lot of mid-range stuff, and sometimes you might even be able to spike and kill some of the like high end of the mid-range stuff. So yeah, it really works well together. And the range, obviously, the 2-inch range for the Haka, the 3-inch range for the Harpoon. The Beast Knob is only 1 range, which is kind of annoying because you really do want him to get in there. If he was 2 range, it would be absolutely bonkers. Probably good that he isn't, so he's not super spammable. But yeah, really appreciate the Harpoon and the Haka for how far they can reach.
Yeah, we said before, like we knew you were a solid player, and then when you're not hamstringing yourself with like a 5 model meme list, when you actually play something that's structurally sound, we didn't realize, you might not have realized at first, right? But it's structurally sound, very well built for the pack and that sort of thing. Yeah, there's you could do very well with it. So you went 4-0, tied for first place with the KO player, and a KO player won on kill points. But I'll say it right here, right? We did the math, and if it was based on strength of schedule, it might have been a little bit different results, and that's all we'll say. But again, not to take any away from Francisco or yourself, I think it just kind of shows that for these big tournaments, if possible, like try to get a 5th round in, or we start doing some 2-day events to really kind of figure out who's on top, as opposed to having, these different tiebreak systems to kind of like, that don't really settle the issue.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I mean, I look at it and it's like ifs and buts, right? It is what it is. And, I was just happy to do as well what I did with the list. And I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it didn't hurt when I heard it was 85 kill points across, 4,000 potential kill points in 4 rounds. So, but like, again, like, it is what it is. That's what the pack was declared to be. And that was, and to be honest, if I'm being completely honest about it, I didn't build explicitly for the pack. I changed my deployments for it, but this was going to be the list, pretty much whatever the pack was, just because I obviously I was pretty committed to the models and the theme. But yeah, no, but in general I agree though, right? There's so many different options and like different little kind of granular changes you can make to a pack that don't necessarily seem like massive changes in results and stuff like that. But obviously, like you said, right, if you compare kill points as it was versus strength of schedule, it completely changes the actual outcome of the winner. So just understanding when you're building packs, just understanding what you're doing, and even if you don't, maybe looking at it afterwards and learning something about it, but just like making sure that if you are making those decisions, just make sure that it's what your intent is, just so you don't accidentally build something that you don't want. But yeah, like I said, this one was kill points, and he got more kill points, so congrats on the win.
Yeah, we'll be talking about a little bit about that with Peter as well later. And then just to you were also voted favorite opponent and best painted, I think, right?
So I got favorite opponent, which was I was pretty stoked because I was back to back that I've won that in the competitive event now, and both times I've come top 5, right? I got second this year, I got 5th last year, and playing obviously pretty aggressively, but still finding a way to make sure that my opponents are having fun, which is really satisfying. That's kind of one of my biggest philosophies whenever I, just in life, but also within Warcry, I'm trying to make people make sure they have a good time, and to be recognized for that was really humbling and very, I was honored. But yeah, with the favorite warband, it was right when, so after the first round, we were starting to put results in, and we were still in BCP, and BCP broke, as it does with Warcry. Shout out War Tally Trolls on the Discord, absolute legend for creating that whole website. But we were in the middle of switching over to that. I was grabbing some lunch. I had to be pizza because I was a Ninja Turtle, but didn't realize that we were putting the warbands out to vote. And so I didn't have my pizza box displayed. It was just all up. Yeah. So I totally, I totally fudged it and messed up.
You could have swept all the soft scores.
Man, I was really hoping. When I realized how close I got, I was super bummed, but I still ended up, I talked to the Kevin who ran it afterwards, and he told me that I still ended up getting second. We had a little extra voting at the end, but I think a lot of people had already submitted their votes for it. Again, it is what it is. Can't say that it would have changed it otherwise. It was just more frustrating to not give myself the opportunity to do it. But yeah, I was 85 kill points, and I think it was 1 vote away from sweeping all 3 categories, which it's honestly, that's my goal every time. I want to have I want to bring people joy with my warband. I want to bring people joy with my play, and I want to play the best I possibly can. So, for me, I don't necessarily want the rewards, but just to know that, I'm challenging myself and reaching the goals I'm setting for myself is very satisfying.
A moral victory for sure. Well, thanks for being on with us.
For sure, man. Appreciate you having me on again. I'm always happy to talk about egg grot spam. I'll be, and yeah, anytime you need me to dress up for any of the shows, you let me know. I'll make it happen, bud.
Yep. And for anyone that wants to listen to this or any of the other 3 Heroes 1 Chaff folks we have coming up, they have a podcast as well on YouTube, 3 Heroes 1 Chaff, and they covered their stuff going live on Monday, April 1st.
Heck yeah. Good stuff. Appreciate it, man.
All right. Kyle, what's up?
Kyle, you are muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry, it's Jordan's late here. I had to run to the corner store, grab some coffee. But how are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great.
Yeah, I'm just glad to finally be home. I've been traveled all last week for Adepticon, traveled all this week for work. So it's my first home day. Finally get back to some modeling. So it's awesome that you guys are able to let me join the call here. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, just want to have a short talk with you about your list. So this is like named character soup here, and just a whole bunch of abilities and stuff like that. So I don't know where to start.
Well, if I could, I have a jumping off point that I'd like to kind of talk about, and then you can kind of go from there wherever. To me, the thing that jumped out at me when I first saw this list was how much control elements you have in it, like really kind of hammer blow control elements in the Marrowscrow Herald. Is that the one that has the bone, the infected bone?
Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah, which seems really good, kind of. Like, it's not something I was like building around, but then I see it and hear it in this 11 model list. I'm like, that actually kind of seems nutty. So how much of this list, like how often were you able to use that ability effectively to turn the game, and how much of it was like more like sibling rivalry using those offensive synergies?
Yeah, if I can start from the kind of the top there, because I do want to talk about the Marrowscrow Herald and its ability for sure. But we do have a video actually going about all of our lists on Monday, just to do the little 3H1C plug before I continue to talk here.
No, yours will make it up before ours. I guarantee it.
Okay. Either way, I'm going to go through the full recap because I'll probably have more time than I did on our call. But I went to this tournament and I had a couple things in mind, right? First things first was major minor victories. We're going up to a 50-person tournament. It was going to be 4 rounds. I knew that, like, if I was going to get wins, they had to be major wins. Those minor wins can knock me out of that top contention because there's probably going to be more than 1-4-0, more than 1-3-0, more than 1-3-1.
There could have been as many as, like, I think almost there could have been 4 undefeated.
There could have been 4.
There were a lot of draws that broke that up. But yeah, so I was thinking the same thing. Tiebreakers were going to be really important. Majors were going to be really important.
Yep. And I also originally built around tournament quests. Unfortunately, they had some tech
Yep.
issues, had to drop those halfway through. Happens. But going in, I knew there are certain breaking points for Major Minor because Major Minor states that if the winner has lost half or more of their warband, that would become a minor win and thus a minor loss, right, for the opponent. So you have, 6 to 7 where you get 3 models to 4 models. You have 8 to 9 where you go from 4 to 5 models. And I wanted to really push the extreme and go from 10 to 11 where I went from 5 models to 6 models. So that means that I wanted at least 11 models in my list. So my opponents had to kill at least 6 models. Additionally, it's 6 unique models, right? So if you kill Thane, for example, and I resurrect Thane back in your face and you kill him again, it doesn't count twice, right? At the end of the game, you look at what was killed. You killed Thane once, it only counts once. So having your opponent have to kill 6 unique models meant that I was most likely, if I was able to get a win, going to get that major win because just sheer action economy, sheer resurrection factor, right? Unfeeling flesh, that kind of defensive profile was my first philosophy going into it. Second philosophy, Underworld's profiles, everyone knows at this point, they're pretty busted, especially for the fact if you look at Thane's boys, they're essentially Graveguard, but they don't have the elite rune mark, meaning that as that minion rune mark, they come back at full life. So everything that I could resurrect would resurrect at full health, 10 wounds. I didn't have to worry about what the value of those triples actually were. One of the reasons, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that is definitely a great efficiency point with that warband. You know, you sometimes are like, well, the guys like you could get an effective Graveguard, I think for like 5 points cheaper. But it's when you have the 5 points to spend, it's definitely worth those 5 points. Plus, sibling rivalry is very good too.
Yeah, my opponent on the third round, Austin Lewis, we actually talked about after the game, talked about Graveguard and what the resurrected changes and saying like, I didn't even want to worry about resurrection because Graveguard was so points efficient anyway. And then you ended up using the charge abilities instead on those horses. But I don't want to deviate too much. Yeah, so going into here, right, I got that 11 models, I got those defensive profiles, I got Unfeeling Flesh, but I also wanted to have the flip side where the meta right now it tends to be kind of like 2 really big dudes and then a whole bunch of chaff, right? But the chaff don't always do that much. In this, having the 4 zombies together, and as you have here on the screen, crackling arcs, it was a way for me, one, to outdo other chaff because I could double move and essentially still have a 3-inch threat range on that crackling arcs. And two, it goes through armor, right? Like there's no defensive profile. I don't care what your toughness is. I'm going to roll a dice. If I got a 6, I'm going to roll 6 dice every 5 up. If I got all 4 zombies in range, you're going to be taking 4 damage, right? So your average, if you get 2 of them, you're going to average 8 damage. Get a good hit, you can even get up to 16, 20. It could really change the outcome of a game and actually changed my second round when we were fighting for that middle section. Opponent moves up, I move up, but I get to move up and still actually kill an opponent with that crackling arcs on turn 1. Why it started off 3-0, and there's nothing my opponent could have done about it, right? Unless they didn't want to contest the middle.
They're gonna have to contest the middle at some point, so you can only dance around it for so long.
Right. And I actually don't think I used Sibling Rivalry once this entire tournament. It's a really good ability. It's kind of tough to set up in a certain sense. And with the list that I had, most of the time, like if they would attack, it would be Thane that would be attacking. I used a lot of weight actions, as my team likes to joke. This is kind of weight action simulator with 11 models, with shambling horde, with the zombies being able to move forward. I could really abuse that weight action to make my opponent run out of activations. But it also means it's much harder to time up one of the Velmorn boys attacking to trigger sibling rivalry on another Velmorn boy. So I might have used it once. I don't think I actually used it all in the tournament. Vampire Lord wasn't actually originally Vampire Lord, it was originally a Vargoyle, but then they came out the new FVC stuff. Vampire Lord, reason I really liked it in here, 26 wounds or 25 wounds, T5 toughness, but can fly, right? That fly 10 is huge, especially when we have any sort of objective missions. You kill one of my guys, I just fly my Vampire Lord 10 inches, resurrect, and essentially got 2 mobile bodies because resurrections can happen anywhere. So between the zombies moving 4, between Shambling Horde and the Vampire Lord and the FEC units moving 5, the list is a lot more mobile than people took credit for. So I can use those weight actions and still where I get to need to go. I didn't want to try something different this tournament. I didn't want to go in and say, all right, I'm going to throw in like another big guy that's just going to beat people up. I really felt that using these weight actions and using Unfeeling Flesh, Baffling Parlay, I had really, really good defensive profiles. So all I need to do is control the opponent. So first thing I brought in, Abhorrent Cardinal. I really, really like this model for 130 points. That double to essentially strip an action straight up just guaranteed me 2 games. As I was able to, for example, in round 1 against the Iron Golems, end of round 3, use the ability, took away an action for Sphomoroid Crusher into round 4, as it's your next activation, not the activation of the same turn. Meaning Sphomoroid Crusher got to move round 4 and couldn't do anything else. Really, really strong. I did not roll well with it. However, I used this ability 6 times in the tournament and I only got 2 off. So it's a complete flip flop of what the statistics should have been. But that speak in tongues, like it really just the way I've been trying to consider to people, it's not a net. I like it better than a net in the sense that if I'm engaged, I could still use it and remove an attack activation, for example. It really just takes whatever model that they invested a ton of points in and removes its ability to really do a ton. So, for example, if you have a Varangard wants to move, use that double, get a ton of attacks, start slamming somebody. When you essentially remove that action from a Varangard and you're like, yeah, you could just move. uh, Great. Okay. It's completely neutered from that standpoint. Sure, could use one weight action and you could say, well, why is this better than a net? And comes back to that action economy, right? I removed an action from you. You can't just use that as a weight action simulator, try to counteract mine a little bit. You only have one. So if you want to leave them there, you can, but most often you're going to want to move with them. Narrow Scroll Heralds, I both consider this the weakest point of my list and the strongest point at the same time. 3 of the 4 games, I didn't use it once at all. Just never came up in terms of like you want to strip the abilities. It's an ability that you want to use turn 1 or turn 2 before they can activate if possible because of how the wording on it's triggered, right? It's at the end of their activation. So if you had used it after they already went, they're still going to get another full turn out of that character. So round 4 though, it did come up and I actually used it twice. So round 1, I actually moved up and used it on a Varangard after I had already moved. The opponent actually chose to accept the bone. So they had to roll a 5 up every single turn. Turn 2, he actually rolled like a 2, I think. Turn 3, he rolled a 3. But turn 4, while he was contesting 2 points with 2 ends of the horse base, he actually rolled a 5 and instantly died, and actually attributed to almost a quarter of my kill points. I also used it on his, I believe it's the Lord of Contagion, the one that's on the flying mount, where he rejected it and couldn't use abilities at all. And at least once during the tournament, he had moved. He said, "I'm going to use a like a rampage," and you can't, right? You said you cannot use any more abilities on this character. So really huge impact, and quite frankly, probably won me round 4 on its own, but pretty much did absolutely nothing the other 3 rounds. So it's very much one of those tools that you're going to bring into a list and state, I'm bringing this for a very, very specific purpose. And you have to be prepared to go in and say, it might not do anything at all besides be a body with an average attack profile. So I hope that covered most of why I brought the list and what it was for.
No, that was
And
great. That was a great in-depth breakdown. And it's definitely worth noting that the list that won the tournament was on 11 models. You know, a lot of the well-performing lists were right in there. It was a good number to hit for this mission pack for sure. Earlier in the call, we kind of were talking about I I had 9, I could have taken 10, and I missed the 10th model all day. The mission pack would just you wanted bodies on the table. And this is so efficient top to bottom to get not only 11 models in here, but like it still fit in some of those profiles that you have in an 11 model warband is just, it's going to be hard for anybody to beat you on like model to model efficiency. And that's even before you bring in any of the synergies that the models have and that kind of thing. So really cool list. And the ability to move across the board and resurrect models is one of my favorite things to do in the game. I played pre-nerf spiders, and that was my favorite thing to do in that list is push the spiders forward, split the 2 leaders to the opposite sides of the board, res the spiders where you need them, and it's a really aggressive way to play and a great way to get activations.
Yeah, this list, if anyone wants to try it, it's not going to make any friends. I played against Rob for like 3 weeks, and he was about done after week 1.
Yeah, so I can see
It's
that.
yeah, he was talking you up more than anyone else on that team leading up to the event.
Like
Hey,
the
I got
best way
one.
to describe it, it's a very like non-interactive list in a certain sense. Like I went into this like tournament to prove that control can work in Warcry. I wanted to say like we don't have to just beat each other up in the face. You know, I used to play Magic back in the day. I played a whole bunch of control decks. I love the format. I love doing that. But it's also to a lot of people where they say, well, this isn't Warcry anymore, right? I just wanted to punch someone in the face and you just stood there. And then when I tried to punch you in the face, you just unfeeling flesh. So it's
Yep.
you're not going to win best opponent with this list because it's not fun.
No.
So I got one more question for you on the tournament day. So I think
Sure.
we have you going 3-0-1. Was that correct?
Yeah.
And then who's your draw against? Did you drew against Austin, right? Another 11 model
Yeah.
Soul Blight list.
Yeah,
Yep.
so Austin ended up actually he got it on kill points. In our third round match, it was a wild match, right? Because it was the one where you had to mark a target and actually hunt it. And I talked to Austin after our game, and just I want to talk to him about like his design profile. And one, he's an excellent player, by the way, who knows his
Yep.
team in and out. He had beautifully painted models, some of the best Black Knights I've ever seen painted in my life. So hats off to him on that. And he kind of talked about, like as I said, like like why did you do this, right? Like why two Black Knights? Because I was never
Yeah.
sold on Black Knights
That's
until
a
this
lot
game.
of Black Knights, right? Like that was my thought too. Like, ugh, that's a lot
I
of Black
wasn't
Knights.
sold
You
on it,
love-
but his logic, as I said, was Soul Blade's all about the resurrection. But I said he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to rely on it. It's there as a tool if he needs it. But he was
Mhm.
saying Black Knights are 20 wounds. Huge, right? That's tanky, right? You still have unfeeling flesh if you need to use that reaction. 4 toughness instead of 3 toughness, so average toughness, but move 8 in a 2-inch range. That's huge, right? In my
Yeah.
game, he got a 555, 666, and used that to assassinate his targets twice. Just being able to move, use that 666, bam, flat 6 damage, and then attack. It's going to kill most 8 to 10 wound shaft just doing that right on its own. And also just having that extended oblong base let him contest 2 points earlier in the tournament. It's just a giant meat wall that has an awesome, once again, armor piercing charge ability.
Yep.
And that's what he utilized effectively instead of the resurrection abilities that he had. In our game in particular, I think in Salty's video even said it though. He made a really bold choice because the game started off kind of like I chose his chaff, I killed it. He chose my chaff, he killed it. And we went back and forth. And round 3 that marked target from round 2 he had actually escaped. So he chose my vampire lord to attempt to assassinate for 2 points instead of 1. He jumps off a building with Velmorn, uses a rampage to get in range, attacks twice. So of King Velmorn, as you see here, 4-4. Oh, he's not on here. I'm sorry, but he's 4-4-2-5. And I was
He's
like,
the
oh,
same
T5.
thing.
I've got 23 wounds. I'll be okay, right? No, he lands 7 crits out of 8 attacks. So he just obliterated my leader. I'm sitting there stunned, like, oh no, now what, right? Round 4, I was able to escape with my one model and kill the other, which ended up in the tie. He just wasn't able to kill both marked targets in that last round. But just a really, really cool design here. Like even in that round, as he was talking about, like bringing like Sir Jedrin, which you don't see a lot. He's saying
No.
like, yeah, like even from a tournament quest standpoint, essentially you can't pick assassinate my leader because the Jedrin round, you're never going to get to him. So just really fun list. Really changed my mind on how Black Knights should work.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
2 is a bit much for my tastes, but
So-
he made him work really well.
So yeah,
Really well.
this is my takeaway of looking at everything. So we'll just kind of skip to the analysis of this one, right? So the Black Knights, like it's a weak offensive profile, but yeah, for 125 points, move 8, 20 wounds, like
Yep.
any faction would kill for those. And so yeah, I think they were overlooked. I chatted with him, like he has one random chaff model, and he chose the Dead Walker zombie, not a skeleton, for having the 10 wounds, the 10 wound break point being very important versus a skeleton.
Mhm.
And of the sons, he chose the two sons of Velmorn with the shields at toughness 4. So like if he did have to res them, they res at full. And he just 2 offensive graveguards with Great White Blade. So again, just tons of durability all throughout the list, where you're gonna have a hard time killing any model. But it's and then everything is pretty fighty then as well. And again, well played too.
Yeah, definitely challenged my perceptions on how to play Soul Blight. So grateful for
Yeah,
that game.
very different. That's the thing. I played Soul Blight a long time ago when I was first getting into Warcry, and there have a lot of really good models, but the faction is so deep and it's so broad it can be difficult to look at it and decide, okay, how am I going to build a cohesive list that has a plan? It's not just like a bunch of models. Like you could play a bunch of Graveguard, you could play a bunch of the flying guys, you could play a big swarm of skeletons and necromancers, you could do all these different things. But to see two lists do really well here that are fundamentally built very differently and different than how I would have built them, or I think maybe the conventional wisdom says how to build it, shows like this is a really deep faction that really rewards like being familiar with it and building correctly out of it.
I mean, I just even think of like the Underworld's models bring such unique abilities, like Duval's boys with that thirst for blood on a double for double attacks, double strength. Like I believe that's untapped too at some point. I really consider that even for my list. But if you can find the right setup targets just to get that one little point of damage, start activating your vampires. Like those vampires get super points efficient, super deadly very, very quickly.
Kyle, we got to get your next team member on here.
Yeah,
Thanks
absolutely.
for
Good
having me.
stuff.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Jump back around then.
Absolutely.
Probably get one or two before Rob gets on here. I sent Rob the link now too. He should be home in just a couple minutes.
All right.
So we have Tegan Harrington with 3-1. He lost to Francisco, the KO player, in the 4th round. He could have been another undefeated otherwise. So again, the same construct for Horns, Ruiner Alpha, two Demolishers with Flame Hurler, 5 Shatterers, and for his choice, the big guy chose the Ogoroid Myrmidon, and actually just left 45 points on the table. So instead of doing something like upgrading a Shatterer to a Demolisher or anything else like that, he took the extra 5 points for the Myrmidon in the abilities and the 2-inch range.
So I wonder about that because I had multiple opponents tell me during the day, oh, this list was originally designed with blessings. I didn't realize until the last second that blessings weren't allowed. These may have been points left there for blessings, and then they got to the event and realized they couldn't use them. That
probably was. Yeah, it probably was.
But here's the thing about that. When 3-1, if that's the case, that just shows the list was played very tightly.
And I believe, looking at the things, I don't think any of the 3 games they played before running into KO were particularly close. I know none of the KO games were close at all.
So yeah, it's a really cool list. It's pretty much stock is the wrong word, but the core is the stock core, right? 2 Flame Hurlers, a Ruinator Alpha, fill in with some Shatterers, pick your heavy hitter or whatever from there. Flame Hurlers are really good. Shatterers are really, really good. Good list. You play it tight, you're going to do really well with it.
Okay. So in 6th place, we had Joe Alexander with Iron Golems. And so this is the old model of, all right, take a bespoke, add a big guy and play it. However, Joe is really, really good. So he's one of the Madison folks from the Dogs of Warcry. He won one of the Minnesota tournaments, I believe, with the Iron Golems. It was the same master molder right before Lead from the Back got nerfed. It was the same sort of shell there. So again, this is really strong because you had the master molder combos with just a large number of the pieces, like giving the attack. It can't crack the whip. There's no combos for that, but just the Lead from the Back to give additional attacks. The Fromoroid Crusher, the Iron Legionaries, just very stout models by themselves. Toughness 5, 12 wounds. It does not, very unassuming list on the surface, right? Not a ton of models, but again, an incredibly strong player from the Madison crew behind it.
Yeah, you play tight, you play some efficient units, you play the Fromoroid Crusher, and you play it well. Yeah. And it just goes to show the difference between majors and minors, right? Because we were just talking to Peter, who had same record and was 4 places lower because of the major minors. It really matters. Got to play tight all the way through the final. Not saying he didn't. I'm just saying you have to follow that closely all the way to the end of the game in a tournament this size.
Yeah, I've been flipping around here. I think there might have been like a 3-0-1 that actually came in ahead of Peter at 3-1, just because of the way that the major minors shook out.
Yep, I believe it.
So Rob's here any minute. So other lists. So Dan, Salty C, put his money where his mouth is and let his YouTube comment section voting choose his warband for him. And so he wound up with Scions of Flame. He actually went 2-1-1 with it. Initiates with Morningstar are just worse Marauders. They're more expensive and don't have the awesome reaction. But yeah, the Fulmroid Crusher, he had Exalted Deathbringer, which is a solid killy guy.
Which, for the record, we were talking about the list I should have played or the list I want to work on going forward. Exalted Deathbringer is a great thing to consider for that Lord of Plague slot.
Yep.
Just a killy model and right in that sub 200 point price range. Just a great stat line. Doesn't do anything fancy, but just has good offensive stats.
Yep. Has good use of doubles, give blood for the Blood God.
Yep.
Speaking of lists that people should have played, this is what he should have gone 4-0 with. This is actually what he was going to play.
Yes.
A little more simple list. And we'll see another list like this as well, right? Where you take the leader, you take a bunch of the chaff, you take maybe one other guy that fits in with it, and you take the big guy. So again, much more.
The big guy, we mean the Fulmroid Crusher. Basically, yes. Almost whenever we say that, we basically mean FOMO is probably the best thing for that.
I mean, Immolator isn't terrible either. I think the Immolator has like a quad that does some area damage. You have more initiates. Again, very simple to play. You're just going to kind of split guys up in 3 groups, put chaff in each group, and just kind of show up and play. So just shows what you can do by just taking a basic bespoke box, adding in a leader, and just playing it real simple.
Yep, I agree. That's basically all I really have to say about that particular one. But nice tight list. And we got Robert here.
Oh, I made it.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, glad to have you on.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to jump in.
So yeah, a little bit different take on Cities of Sigmar. We had a typical Cities of Sigmar gun line we talked about a little bit earlier, but here's your take on it. And you might have talked a little bit about it. I know we chatted about it before the Adepticon, and I think you guys are doing something that'll come out before this video comes out, kind of talking through the whole thought process behind it. But give us a real quick rundown on a couple of the choices here.
Yeah, in particular, when I first started playing with COS, I did the gun line with the Ogre, and the Ogre is awesome, but the Ogre is more reactive than proactive. Mm-hmm. So I figured when I was designing the list, I have to be ready to face FOMOs, Myrmidons, Varanguards, KO, and or Soulblight shenanigans, right? Like that's like the top things. And putting the Free Guild Cavalier Marshal, giving me 9 inches, and with the Herald, I get to make that free move, which is most likely going to be 9 inches for free. And that to me was the play to make because it's proactive. So I used him to run down anything that would be a gun line or run down a reser or be able to go set up a block for anywhere. And also he has the same stat lines minus the reach as a Killian King in terms of 4-5-2-5. Yeah, he doesn't have the Storm of Blows, but he's also only 255 points. So I figured that was like a good compensation for that. And then I used the other 2, which you're probably referring to, Domitan and the Vulcan Runefather.
Yeah, you chat about Domitan. You were looking for like a mobile threat, and he came in at the right points value.
Yeah, I mean 200 points is an anti-prime, right? Which is like inherently way better at fighting. But the anti-prime only moves 3, and he doesn't have anything in my list to give him an extra move, an extra attack. There's no Calthea, so on and so forth. Domitan on a double is able to add 2 to his movement value, so he goes up to 6, and he adds 1 to his toughness. So I use Domitan as like an alpha pin or an alpha block. So he would run in, be able to sit there and tank a lot of weak things, take up space, or go steal a point. And moving 12 inches on a Stormcast is not nothing. He also had the Bulwark, so my other boys can react off him and get toughness increase. He has the 2-4-3-6 magic lineup shot that's from Stormcast, like a Knight Arcanum. And, he had a fairly mediocre but decent 3-4-2-4 2-inch staff. He did everything I needed him to do, and he has a quad that threatens anybody grouping up on a point. It never came up, unfortunately, which is a big bummer. But he acted as just a big sulk. He acted as a really good point harasser, chaser. He was just really good overall.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed the 30 wounds, or maybe I had but forgotten about it. Yeah, compared to if you're getting an anti-prime or something like that, you're not getting 30 wounds, and you're maybe getting 25. If I want to say
25. They have T6 though, but like this guy goes up to T6, but the 5 wounds makes a huge difference.
And then the other one, actually, I didn't ask about this one. So your Vulcan Rune Daddy with the Bokaz, he's more or less just taken because of his profile. You're the two abilities there, right? The bonus move action or igniting weapon to just light stuff up.
Yeah, ignite weapon 100%. It could be on his melee or his ranged. So you're just kind of giving yourself insurance of.
That's right. I keep forgetting it works on range attacks too.
Yeah, he also has the elite rune mark. So my boys can take it and give the super counter if they have to. So we also can share and steal from that. So I designed that these allies would still be able to give the react game if I need to, even though that wasn't my first priority. He's also 3-5-22 wounds for 150, which is solid. It's similar to Destruction when you see Ardboy bosses, right? It's just a good value unit that's going to do a lot of work with very minimal dice. I also don't have any other things to use dice in other than Onslaught. After I'm done with a triple for pulling people, I'd pull people maybe once or twice a game, and after that, like, my Herald's done. I didn't really have to shift people for these missions too much. And he and Domiton don't get moved, but they do have dice dumps. And the Vulcan Runefather also has a quad, if you're familiar with it, which is, I think it's aspect of the scales. You roll 6 dice for each 2 up. You do half the value of the dice. So Runefather attacked, quadded, and I removed a FOMO in one reaction or one action. So that was against the second game against Chris Hyde, and that was the reason I walked away with the win that game, is because he had the second round dead to rights, and I was just able to sit there and attack. I hit for 14 off those, like, crit hit, and then I just burned him out for 10 for the rest of it. So he 150 points taking out 260 points is just worth its weight in gold right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good trade.
Yeah. I partnered him with the War Surgeon, so whenever he would take damage, War Surgeon would just heal him back up, so he could just sit there and tank for days.
Okay, I was going to ask about that next as well. If you use the War Surgeon ability, or he was just a different steel helm. The gargoyle was probably just to make the points fit, I think, right?
Yep. That was straight up what it was. It made the points fit up to 1,000. We didn't have blessings, so why not squeak as much as I can in? And it could still react. It's a beast. There's no treasure missions, so it could still go up to T4. It could still do the 2 back. And it's just, just a body that takes up spot. But the Surgeon being at 12 wounds, less toughness than a Steel Helm, but the 2 wounds made a difference a couple times. Oh yeah. And just being able to put a double out and just roll a D6 and, like, oh, that's 5 wounds off my Runefather. He's back up. And then the Runefather's reaction also is turning 2 crits into 2 hits. So he just sits there and tanks if I need him to, if I don't need him to remove anything.
And then the last question. So you went 3-1, and then you lost to a teammate too, right?
Yeah, I lost to Peter, and then Peter lost to Mike after that.
That's right. And so the one thing I haven't covered, so we've had a couple 3 Heroes 1 Chaff members on already, and with the overall record for your team was what, 13-2-1?
Yeah,
13-2-1, with the losses coming to each other. The losses and the draws coming to each other, I believe.
The draw was between Kyle and another
Kyle and Austin. Yep,
right.
Yep, that was Kyle and Austin.
Right, and then the losses were me to Pete and Pete to Mike, and that was it.
Yep. Yeah, so strong showing there.
Yeah, good
for
run.
you guys to crow about. Oh, we got Pete. All right.
Hello.
What's up?
How you guys doing?
Good.
So far, so good. Talking about a lot of Warcry lists, so having a good time with that.
Yeah. So we already talked about this one. I believe you brought the same list that you brought to our tournament. We got the picture and everything. Peter Mercincavage at 3-1. Bonder Boss, Crusher, Ardboy Boss with Choppas, Snurk Sour Tongue, 2 Brugits, Prague Aneta and Stabba with Barb.
Neta.
With I know Prague Aneta, and then a Stabba with Barb Net. So tell us how your tournament went.
Well, overall it was great experience. I mean, you really can't complain with 3-1 end of the day. But it was one of those things. I talked to Rob on Discord a lot about this. Is I knew going into this tournament, just different tournaments kind of go into different directions as far as major minor. And I knew with it being the classic major minor, running half models, running an 8 model list was going to be risky. But I'm quite stubborn in the area that I think Gloomspite Gits are at their prime at 8, at least for my play style. So it was either bring an 8 model Gloomspite Gits list or bring a different warband. And I've just got this itch to try to get Nova or Adepticon with Gits. So that ended up going that route and just taking the risk. And sure enough, that turned into 2 minor wins, because in the 4th round of both those games, I lost that 4th model. So it was one of those situations where it's like, yeah, they could have very easily been majors if I had just been able to keep one guy a couple wounds up those 2 games, but that's the risk you play when you go with it. So took 1 major win, 2 minor wins, and then in the finals lost heavily to Mike Sansom with his and
But as I understand it, though, the dice were so hot for him, or the dice were so bad for you, it was out of your control.
Oh, well, yeah, I made one mistake, which was interesting because I use an old 40K rule stick that I got in a Dark Vengeance box back in like 5th edition, because I used to play a lot of 40K, and we call them the whippy sticks. And it turns out the first notch on that is about 1 millimeter short. And you're like, hey, what's 1 millimeter? Well, 1 millimeter is the difference of his Beast Knob being in range of my Crusher round 1 or not being with a Rampage. And he was a super good sport about it. We actually did a roll off, lost the roll off, and due to that, Crusher died beginning of round 2. And then he was making just about every roll he needed to. That being said, that doesn't take away from the fact that Mike just played phenomenally. I mean, he was fantastic. He was full Michelangelo and get up and all that day. So it was a well-earned win on his part. And if I was going to lose to anybody, I'm glad it was Mike. But
he was locked in for this event. I played him as well, and he was playing well all day.
Oh, he was so focused. You could tell he was rolling with it.
Yeah, we said earlier that we knew he's good because he plays a ton. But when he doesn't handicap himself with a meme list, I mean, he brought a meme list. I mean, he kitbashed it to be a meme list, but it was when we chatted with him, it was very structurally sound.
Sure. Well, a big thing too going into that, a lot of people are not too sure about egg grots, and I got to be honest, I was kind of one of them. But the way he plays them and getting that higher model count, which I think made a big difference.
Yeah, it was very effective.
Right, he sets you up. So because the big thing with KMK Monster Killers is you can remove them very quickly because they don't have a high toughness, right? But the way he plays and having that higher model count, he was able to be cagey with them and stay out of major conflicts and then just dive back in when it was the prime time. And it just clearly it worked because I mean he nailed it that day. But yeah, great list, very funky play style, which right up his alley. Usually he's a big proponent of bringing the big stuff and smash. So it was a nice shake up for him, bringing something that plays a little bit different, but clearly it worked well for him.
Something with more than 5 models.
Yeah, you got it. Wasn't the 3 tyrant list, right?
Right. Yeah. So your list here, what are your thoughts about this one going forward? You continuing on working on this list here? Any changes you're considering? What are your thoughts?
It's tough because I'm kind of stuck right now because I spent all last year fine tuning these guys. And I was telling him, I feel in a hard place with it because I wanted to bring something different to Adepticon, but it plays so good. Again, I think it was the wrong list to bring for the style of tournament that it was.
Yeah. I had some feel bads about that after like round one, looking at my list, like, yep, I probably could have taken this in a little bit different direction, like for this particular event. But
Sure. Yeah, it was a pure ego move on my part, just because it's like I wanted to win it with Gloomspite. But as far as like changing up the list, I'll be honest, until we get like a point shake up or there's different allies coming out or something, like I think it's the best I can do with them, and that says a lot. And maybe I'm wrong. But after tuning them for like 8 tournaments last year, it's like I just feel like I've kind of hit a wall with them where I love playing that list. It is a phenomenal list in my opinion. I just you play it right and you use the abilities right. It removes models, and you can really control your opponent with it. But I don't know where to go with it next. That's part of the reason for a lot of tournaments so far this year. I've been kind of and end of last year, I've been kind of messing around with other war bands and stuff, which is kind of just me testing things out till we get more of a shakeup, I guess.
Fair enough. Yeah, list is certainly very, very solid. Obviously, for people who aren't necessarily watching but are listening, Bounder Boss, Crusher, Hardboy Boss with Choppas, Snurk, 2 Brugits, Prog, Stabba as a reminder. Brugits are obviously insane. Snurk is that glass cannon, but it has good range and puts out a ton of damage. Crushers are insane damage output. Just a lot of really good models in this list, and obviously really good abilities too.
So. And something to think about too. It's like I love running 4 threat lists, and you could certainly come up with some really great 3 threat lists for Gloomspite. I mean, because the wealth of great allies and destruction, especially like this warband doesn't even mess. This particular list doesn't even dip into blessings. So there's definitely other directions you can go with it. Just I would be curious whether or not it kind of gets up to that same level though. But yeah, you got a nice mix of multiple combos. I mean, playing, I think it was it my dagger? Dagger was the biggest one there. I don't know how to not run Snurk, a Brugit, and a Bounder Boss in the same deployment.
Yeah.
It is such a combo piece. Like I love it. I can't talk enough about it. But yeah, there's just a lot of threats on the board, and you can just go in so many directions and control your opponent. It just makes for a really dynamic game, in my opinion.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah, we were talking about that a little earlier with Nurgle shells too. Like you could essentially build 4 threat lists in the Nurgle shell too, but if you follow the advice that the Dan Salty Sea had been doing in the list that he'd been playing this year.
Sure. I know I've messed around with them a bit and doing something like you do Nurgle Demons, then you bring in Dread Pageant, and then go Fulmroid, and that makes for a really, really dynamic way of playing where you're bringing those more threats instead of going with the classic 2 Titan. But there's certainly ways to do it for sure.
Yeah, I think that the 4 threat spreading out, clearing Chaff type list was a really important thing to have in this event.
Oh, absolutely.
And you don't necessarily need a Titan to clear Chaff. Sometimes those mid-range models can chug a Moonshine Potion and clear a lot of Chaff out for you. Like Snurk can do a really good job of that at 130 points.
Right. Well, him and the Hardboy Boss, right? Because everybody forgets about the Hardboy Boss, but the 135 points with the ability on a double to jump into combat and swing twice. I mean, he has the ability to just really surprise you and hit above his weight class, because crit and 5s can add up really quick when you're throwing 8 dice at something.
Yep, 4, 5, 2, 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his strength's decent too. He's such a great little blender. And like you said, Snurk, yeah, if you ignore Snurk, you'll regret it. It's up to the pilot to make it so if you're trying to get him, you make your opponent pay for it. Right? Don't make it easy for him.
Yeah, good stuff.
Well, again, thanks for being on, Peter, on relatively short notice. It's good having you, and make sure that we're covering everybody from 3 Heroes 1 Chaff and their lists on here.
I appreciate it. No, this was great. I'm glad I was able to hop on. It's always a pleasure talking with you guys. I look forward to listening.
Yep. Well, we got 2 lists to cover pretty quickly here, and then we'll wrap it, and we'll get So we talked about JJ's list. Here's his list. Again, the typical Ossiarch Bone Reapers build. He had the Mortek Hekatos. He had 1 Stalker, 5 Mortek Guard, 2 with the Spear, 3 with the Soul Cleaver. But then his little contribution and spice was the Dreadblade Harrow that you talked about, with bringing its res ability, and also the Excursion Exemplar, which is again a solid piece to bring in at 205, 3/6, 4/6. I've played against it before, and yeah, it does work. If you just need a guy that hits hard, yeah,
it's very bursty. And the other thing to talk about, maybe just to add a couple more points to the Dreadblade Harrow, because we've talked about it with a couple people now, the flexibility of resing. The Dreadblade Harrow is like the archetypal push your units forward, get the Dreadblade Harrow anywhere on the battlefield you want. Not only can it fly and move 10, but it can teleport. And you can pick almost anywhere on the board to start resing those models, which is really powerful, especially when you're fighting over, say, the middle of a board or the last. Everyone's spread out and maybe they've been beating each other up in ley lines and you're trying to get the control of those last couple of points. That kind of thing. The Dreadblade Harrow can just pop over there, res a model right on the objective, anywhere on the board. It's really hard to counterplay against it. Very powerful ability, worked really well in this list.
When you told me that you drew, I was like, oh, you drew versus Zosak Bone Reapers. Okay, and then I saw like, oh, you drew against JJ. Like, yeah, JJ has his moments.
Yeah, he played very, very tight. This list is tanky. It's surprisingly mobile. You know, it does a good job. It plays to the objectives well.
And then we mentioned Chris Hyatt a couple times here. I just want to mention his list because he's Mr. Untamed Beasts, and he did the same. He did the same thing. I know he's usually runs double Heart Eater. He went with the Fulmoroid Crusher as well in his list, and then 6 Plains Runners, 990 points, 9 models. And yeah, the Heart Eater does work. It's 5/5/2/5. Having played Untamed Beasts, he can even if I'm not playing super hard, Heart Eater can accidentally just go too hard and kill stuff because of Savage Fury, giving it a +1 movement on its next move and then +1 attack on the next attack. Really good for that move attack combo.
I agree. 5 attacks at 5 strength is really, really potent. 20 wounds is a victim of the, bespoke design philosophy. But you get your 9 models, you get your 2 of 3 really mobile threats. Fulmoroid Crushers, fast too. Yeah, Plains Runners are fast and decent at their point cost. Just a solid list.
Yep. So yeah, just shout out to Chris, and also want to say before we go, happy birthday to Chris. Everybody in the comment section, wish Chris happy birthday.
Hey, happy birthday, Chris.
One last thing for you here too, Rob.
Yeah, man.
So we had Kyle on already talking a little bit about it. So get your take here on the upcoming tournaments and events. So best hype gets to go in the final episode.
Oh man, best hype. Well, we got a nice local place down in Nova Games, not to be confused for Nova, North Virginia. And we have a legitimate official trophy being handed out from James Workshop himself. No Etsy trophies. And we just have a lot of really high quality, good players. It's going to be good time, a ton of good terrain, good people, some good places to eat next to it. And it's just everything, all the money goes straight back into prize support. So everybody is going to walk away top 3. And we always give prize support to Wooden Spoon as well. And it's just going to be a good time. And we're just going to go out there, start rolling dice. It's going to be very stress-free. And I think it's going to be an awesome time for it.
And then also for the online TTS leagues, you got 2 leagues going on, competitive and casual. Right now, as of the time of recording, it's Saturday the 30th. What's the deadline to get registered in case this video happens to go out in time?
The deadline to get registered for this week, I always put everything in readmes, but Wednesday, April 3rd, before midnight, put it on War Tally, put the list in, shoot me your Discord so I have your information, get you all set up, and you guys can come on in. And we're opening up casual too for everybody. It used to just be give us your list, but now casual, you could change your list based on whoever your opponent is, you guys can meet up and say, I want to play with the FOMO. Well, okay, I'll play with something big too. Or if you guys want to play one box it up. You guys want twists, twist it up. Whatever you guys want to do to have a good time and just have a guaranteed game with somebody around the world once a week. That's what it's about.
All right. Yeah, very cool. Because I think in previous leagues, and you've run a bunch of leagues before, you actually had kind of like a 50-50 split between people actually taking serious lists for testing and just folks just kind of going on and messing around.
Yeah. We decided that everybody was really into, like, we wanted people to also have, like, I'm afraid to dip my toes into playing. So like, just put casual up. And I thought we were going to see a flux, you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. We've only gone up steadily. I think we've had a few people leave, but then replaced by 2 to 3 people instantly. So we've only seen, and like, I think we have over like almost 35 unique people between both leagues, 20 something in one league, 16 in the other. I haven't even checked it as of right now, but I know they're both healthy. They're both easy ways to find games. And it's competitive as 20 and casual as 19.
Nice.
As of right now. So almost 40 people right now.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's a good time.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I appreciate it. I can't wait to hear your stuff out, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Have a good one.
You too. Take care, guys.
This brings us to a close for this episode of Dayton Warcry Club. Next time, we're going to have Zach on, and Zach's going to be running the episode. He has a topic he wanted to cover about teaching Warcry. So we're going to talk about that and do a little roundtable on that based on the last event that we had. So stop on by for that. It'd be a little bit different tone there. So if you're new to Warcry, new listeners, or just trying to spread Warcry in your area, stop by and check that out.
You find yourself teaching a lot of players, or you would like to be someone that can show up at a store and teach the game, I think it'll have a lot of good information.
Until then, you can get us on the, also if you're new to Warcry, you can also get on the official Warcry Discord. Links in the description there. You can catch me on there. My name is War Machine.
And I'm Fred Shred.
Thanks for listening.